Well, this raises maybe a different, another but related question of the idea of, so I think we can dispel for everyone out there this myth that there was an appropriation of a pagan holiday or the date of a pagan holiday with regards to Christmas. But as we were talking about before we get on here, there have still been Christians throughout church history. Think of like some of the Puritans who came over to America who thought we shouldn't celebrate Christmas at all, right? And then there is a sense that in our celebration of Christmas, there have been maybe things like pagan symbols, or, think like maybe the Christmas tree. It's as like a pagan symbol. There's the story of Saint Boniface chopping down the oak of Donar, the Frisian god. Uh, you know, whether or not the historicity of that is not super important right now, but the idea of the church the global mission, the global Christian mission is occurring, taking pagan symbols, maybe even certain concepts or images, but sort of baptizing them or Christianizing them, right? And some people may say that this was not a good thing over the course of the church's history. But I think in principle, we might want to defend the idea of appropriating or taking things that were maybe even originally pagan and Christianizing them, and that this is actually an appropriate thing for the church to do.
Well, yeah, I mean, if you think about even Easter, what are the two primary, other than the cross, the resurrection, right, the empty tomb, which you see, it's fairly replete within Christian circles. What are the other main symbols of Easter? It's bunnies and eggs. And of course, people have tried for a long time to say, you see, these are pagan representations of fertility signs. And to some extent, that may be true. I don't know that they all kind of are symbols of new life, and of course, the resurrection.
Well, they're just things from nature, right?
We're all human beings, right? And so we share, and this is, I think, kind of my point, and what you're saying, Tony, is we all share in this idea that certain things happen, or we celebrate certain things in a certain way because we share a common reference in the fact that we're human beings.
Yeah.
Yes, new life, is that's a ubiquitous sign. So of course Christians are going to use it just like everybody else because it's just part and parcel of the language.
And
so
I would add that I think we should also see it maybe this way, that there are a lot of things in nature and also with symbolism when we talk about paganism. A lot of things have been misappropriated. What Christianity does is it's rightly appropriates things. And I would want to see it that way. And I think that's where exactly the fight is. So even the fight against Christmas and Christian holidays is basically to recapture these symbols, recapture this and orient them towards paganism and other religions. And I think that's exactly where the fight is. And we have to keep it rightly appropriated. With regards to my concern is that how is it that the people within the church lack discernment when it comes to dates or celebration, the birth of Christ? What has happened even with Puritans when we're talking about the whole pietism has creeped into the Gnosticism of some sort, right? The physical representation of the birth of Christ doesn't mean much. It's about his resurrection. And I think we can talk more about that, how the Eastern world mostly looks at celebrations like this as well. So I think there's an aversion to traditions because we know the date's not mentioned in the Bible. We have to rely on the church traditions when it comes to dates and when they're celebrated and things like that. And especially in the Protestant movement, I mean, there is definitely an attempt to distance as much as possible not just from the icons and the statues and
Mm-hmm.
saints, but also the celebrations associated with those saints, celebrations associated with even Christ, the birth of Christ, Christmas itself. So I think that needs to be maintained and recaptured. And again, that's exactly where the fight is.
Yeah, I think it can go too far. I mean, I think obviously it's easy to get lost in the commercialism. It's easy to get lost in the tasks of Christmas. Oh, I got to buy X number of gifts. It's easy to especially to have your kids kind of drift into the gimme aspect of it. We always, we did something similar in terms of symbols. We would always bake a birthday cake on December 25th, just kind of for young kids to kind of get rooted in the idea that this is what we're celebrating, is the birth of Christ. I know many people who say, okay, one of the things that you have to do for Christmas is go in your room and pick 2 or 3 toys that you are going to give away to someone else. You're going to get new ones, right? You're going to get some new stuff. You're going to have to make. And I thought that was a nice idea as well. But so I think we can drift in this, but this isn't anything new. Matter of fact, Augustine wrote about this in his writings. He says the day is called the birthday of the Lord, on which the wisdom of God manifested himself as a speechless child, and the word of God wordlessly uttered a sound of a human voice. And he goes on to say, for whose benefit did such unparalleled greatness come into such lowliness? Certainly for no personal advantage, but definitely for our great good, if only we believe. Therefore arouse yourself, O man, for your God has become man. Awake, sleeper, and arise from among the dead, and Christ will enlighten thee. And then he ends it by saying, let us joyfully celebrate the coming of our salvation and redemption. Let us celebrate the festal day on which the great and timeless one came from the great and timeless day to this brief span in our day. So Augustine here is saying, look, guys, celebrate. This is a marked event in history. The angels were in the sky telling the shepherds the glory of God, peace on earth and among men. And
this is interesting. I'll add this to, given my experience in living in India and other places, and how we saw Christmas growing up. It's exactly against, in one sense, what Augustine is saying. If you look at the Eastern world, we have to look at the philosophy and their theology that guides the idea of celebration. It's not tied to the idea of birth. Birth brings you into suffering. It's the death that is the gateway to liberation. So there's a shift. Even in the Western world, we have adopted that idea of death being promoted over birth. So in that regard, we are throwing away celebrations. So this is why I think it's important to redeem it even more. And, we got to be celebrating the birth of Christ, which points to the idea of restoration, the idea of salvation, not merely liberation. So birth is, in one sense, that's why the whole idea of resurrection itself, the day of celebrating the Lord's Day, it's beautiful. And we got to be promoting even that more.